Following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, your DNA going to be patented for profit. A landmark Supreme Court decision looms over the rights to genetic testing for breast and ovarian cancer. A Chicago filmmaker takes us to the battle's epicenter.
Showdown in Springfield. On the line, gun rights, a Chicago casino, and that billion-dollar pension problem.
Businesses have donated plenty of money, but where's the plan? Criticism of Mayor Emanuel's plea for businesses to fund programs to end Chicago violence.
And no money, no problem. At one Chicago cafe, it serves plenty of free food and heaping portions of inspiration. These stories and more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Who has the right to patent the genes that exist in your body? That is the question at the heart of a landmark case now before the U.S. Supreme Court.
One American company holds the patents to two genes tied to breast and ovarian cancer. That company also owns rights to the only test that determines who is at high risk. Many women, including actress Angelina Jolie, have taken that test only to confront life-changing decisions.
The actress's difficult and public choice to have a preventive double mastectomy spotlights the quandary faced by tens of thousands of women who've tested positive for the genetic defect and wonder what to do next. Before Angelina Jolie, there was Joanna Rudnick, a Chicago filmmaker facing the same daunting diagnosis.
You want to have kids, so the surgical issue is out for now.
Joanna was just 27 when she tested positive for the BRCA1 genetic defect, putting her at high risk for developing aggressive breast and ovarian cancer, diseases that had devastated her family.
You know the numbers. You've got about an 85 to 90% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer and about a 50 to 60% chance of developing ovarian cancer.
Should she remove healthy breasts and ovaries and give up her dream of having a family, or watch and wait?
I wasn't even brought up with the word cancer. They didn't even use the word in my house.
Joanna turned to her family and her craft, capturing her journey in a documentary called In the Family.
I really made the film In the Family because I wanted to support all choices of women who are going through this, and I wanted to show how difficult these decisions are.
If families talk about diseases that they've encountered in their family, it could save other family members' lives. And especially for breast and ovarian cancer, that's very important.
Dr. Fumi Olapati is a medical oncologist at the University of Chicago Hospitals. She runs the Cancer Risk Clinic, studying hereditary cancer and the groundbreaking links to the BRCA genes.
We know the genetic architecture of breast cancer. We know what genes are altered. We know when genes are altered. And we're using that genetic knowledge to develop new therapies that are making it easier for us to cure more women when they're diagnosed with breast cancer. But we want to do even better than that. We want to prevent breast cancer.
One company, Myriad Genetics, holds the key when it comes to breast and ovarian cancer. The Salt Lake City lab isolated, then patented the BRCA1 and 2 genes, and the only test that detects the mutations that determine high risk.
We're now receiving about 350 samples a day.
The cost of one test, more than $3,000.
You said when the test came out that this is going to be a less expensive test. This test will one day be hundreds of dollars. So why is it still $3,000? Why is it increasing?
That's a good question.
I would argue that people are upset because there's money being made on something that exists in nature.
Right. If we make this huge, multi-tens of million dollars investment in educating the market, don't we have a right to deliver the test? The facts are that women are getting tested.
Knowing whether you have this mutation can really save your lives. But it's not that you should know and then go and have your breast taken off. No, there are options for that.
In fact, this inherited gene mutation is only responsible for about 5% of all breast cancers, 10 to 15% of ovarian cancers. Dr. Olapati says there is often no need to rush into surgery. Joanna Rudnick chose to wait 12 years until she had a family. Her crushing breast cancer diagnosis came after the birth of her second child.
I was being screened as carefully as you possibly could for breast cancer, but then I got pregnant and I had 2 babies back to back. And in that window of time, somewhere, and we don't know when, I got breast cancer. The worst thing about getting breast cancer for me was that I had the knowledge to prevent it.
Just 2 weeks ago, Joanna had both breasts and ovaries removed. Her prognosis is good, but her fight is far from over. She believes the Myriad Genetics patent stands in the way of cheaper testing and better research.
I have 2 girls, and they both are at risk of having this mutation. And this will never be over to me until we do have better options.
In the next few weeks, the Supreme Court will determine if Myriad's patent on the BRCA1 and 2 genes stands, along with the one test called BRCA analysis now available. Joining us to talk about BRCA testing and the case before the High Court is Dr. Jeffrey Duncan of Northwestern University School of Medicine. He's a practicing obstetrician-gynecologist and a clinical geneticist. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Dr. Duncan, how critical is this Supreme Court decision to medicine and to science?
Well, we believe that it's critical because gene testing, although widely available in many instances, this particular test is limited to just one laboratory in the U.S. And it's sort of a monopoly, and we don't think that's good medicine.
Now, when you look at this, I mean, can you patent something that exists in nature? I mean, can I pluck an apple off a tree and argue that the apple is a different product than the apple that was on the tree?
Yeah, no, I think that argument has been raised and is completely valid, and that's why in the clinical and scientific community we don't believe that DNA should be patentable. And that's why we hope the Supreme Court will rule favorably that laboratories cannot have a monopoly on genetic testing.
Now, in a statement from Myriad Genetics, they said this case has potentially broad implications for the biotech, animal health, and agricultural industries, and the development of products and services of enormous benefit to society. Countless companies and investors have risked billions of dollars to research and develop scientific advances under the promise of strong patent protection. In essence, without the legal guarantee of patent protection, this may have a chilling effect on research if companies can't be guaranteed that they'll get a return on their investment. Do you agree with that?
Well, sure, that's the argument they've used for years. But let's face it, there are many other very successful laboratories in the U.S. and worldwide that are able to keep the doors open without having such exclusion over this testing.
Do you think it might chill innovation, though, if people can't be guaranteed that they have the lead on perhaps sole profit or the top tier of profit in making an investment, because we know biotech is very expensive?
Well, there's no evidence that that would be the case. I mean, there's plenty of innovation going on in the field of genetics and genomics that are not revolving solely around the ability to earn a profit.
In cases like this one, what are your concerns when it comes to the welfare of the patients that you see?
Well, it's all a question of accessibility and affordability for testing, medications, all sorts of healthcare services. And like any other sort of marketplace, if there's competition in the field, we feel like this particular testing will be more affordable to a broader population.
Now, in this case, the Myriad Genetics test runs about $3,400 without insurance. I know there are add-ons that you can tack on that will make the price tag higher. Myriad claims that most, 95% of the tests that they do, of the $250,000 a year, are covered by insurance. Is that enough?
Well, that's their claim, but keep in mind that there may be many women who never get to that point, who decide ahead of time that they are not able to afford the test if they have to pay out of pocket, or perhaps have inadequate insurance coverage to even submit the test ahead of time. Most of those conversations actually take place before the blood specimen arrives at Myriad, so that's a bit of a flimsy claim.
Now, in the patients you see, I mean, do people worry about affordability of something like this? Because it is an expensive item.
Yeah, sure, that comes up all the time in our conversations, and we usually ask them to check ahead of time with their insurance company to see if it will be covered. And we have counselors and others who can help patients make those determinations ahead of time.
Now, we know Myriad has the patent on the gene that exists in human bodies. They also have a patent on this test. Is there a danger in not being able to get a second opinion when it comes to genetic testing?
Well, this particular test happens to be very reliable in terms of providing an answer and providing a diagnostic result. So second opinions with respect to the interpretation of the finding is not really in question. There are some occasions where a test may come back inconclusive, or in other words have a finding where we don't know the significance of a particular sequence of DNA. That's called a variant of undetermined significance, and that can pose counseling issues, as you might imagine. But there's not really necessarily any need to have a second opinion about the specific test result in this circumstance.
You mentioned counseling. We've seen Angelina Jolie go through this, obviously shed a very public light on this. But who really should get this test? It seems like a narrow segment of the population, and a part of the population that people don't necessarily talk about as well, men.
Right. So there's it's sort of a complicated answer to that question. There are certain risk factors related to personal or family history with regards to malignancies within a family that should trigger consideration of this test. And we believe that genetic specialists, genetic counselors are very important in helping to determine who should pursue that testing. On the other hand, we also really want patients, women in particular, to be aware of their family histories, both from the mother's side of the family as well as the father's side of the family. And we also would like general practice physicians to pay particular attention to family history because those kinds of determinations help to decide who should pursue testing. It's not meant for the general population. It is meant for women who come from at-risk families.
Dr. Duncan, this is a complicated issue and one that we will follow closely. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For more on our interview with University of Chicago's Dr. Fumio Lapati, log on to our website, WYCC.org. And it is a busy week in Springfield as the legislative session goes down to the wire. Lawmakers have yet to decide on major issues including concealed carry, same-sex marriage, and that massive pension problem. Here's Chris with more.
Illinois lawmakers are staring at a midnight Friday deadline. Will time run out before they're able to settle on any of the outstanding issues? Joining us to talk about that and the week's other trending stories are Darren Reesberg, Executive Director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, Joan Esposito, partner at J2SC.com, and Republican strategist Lenny McAllister. Thanks for joining us today. So all kinds of things on the docket in Springfield, and it looks like on one of the more controversial topics, concealed carry, compromise is coming, Darren, one which would allow Chicago to have its own sort of home rule with guns. Do you think that's the best way to go?
I do, Chris. I think that, the state obviously is very different. I worked for the state in the education area for 6 years or so and know that from Chicago all the way down to Cairo, we have tremendous disparity amongst our communities in terms of their approach and in terms of their issues. And I think that means that local control is often necessary in order to create the right type of legal system.
Joan, there are some 220 jurisdictions in Illinois. If you give an exemption to Chicago, does that open up a can of worms?
Not really. Chicago is so much different than the rest of the state. Different problems, different mindset, different population. And especially in Chicago, I think people are really frustrated. It seems like the criminals have guns, the police have guns, and a lot of people feel that, law-abiding citizens are very vulnerable because they're the only ones that don't have guns. Would I want to conceal a gun? No, I wouldn't. But if it was something that was really important to you and you felt it was necessary for your safety, I don't know that I would tell you you couldn't.
Lenny, where do you see this fitting in with the city of Chicago? I mean, the mayor has been very clear on his position against guns.
I think part of the problem that we're facing is we can talk about the different municipalities, we can talk about the different areas in the state, as Darren mentioned, but we're still talking about the same United States Constitution. So if you have a statewide law that says that you can do this, but some municipalities can do some things and others cannot, you are lining yourselves up for a lawsuit somewhere down the road.
Isn't that going to happen no matter what happens?
I think that if you deny the right of certain individuals, especially those that feel like their lives are at risk every day here in Chicago in certain neighborhoods, to not be able to have that concealed carry, you're looking at a lawsuit perhaps coming sooner than later. Remember, we had the McDonald versus City of Chicago in 2010 before Citizens United. Can you imagine Citizens United money, PAC money, the NRA coming in here and challenging this? I can see it before the next presidential election if this gets passed in this hodgepodge type of manner.
One of the things that Springfield is also dealing with, again, of course, is the casino bill, and it's gone into a state of vagueness. We don't know exactly what is going to be
How
in this
shocking
legislation.
for Springfield.
At one point, the governor seemed to be indicating that he was in favor, and now radio silence from the governor's office. What do you make of that, Darren?
Well, I mean, I think we're at a point right now where revenue is critical. So, I think that if I had to place odds on this, no pun intended, I would actually see something still moving before this session ends. I think from what I'm hearing, you see some disputes about where some money will come from in order to go to Cook County as a county body, and whether that money will come from Chicago, or whether that money will come from the South Suburban Casino. And I think there's a lot of wrangling on those types of issues right now. The money is obviously critical to all parties, so that needs to get resolved. And I think those are the types of compromises that actually can be made in the waning days of a session. So I'm hopeful that we'll have something pass, putting aside what one feels about casinos. I think we'll see something come through.
One of the big sticking points from the Illinois regulators, they're worried that if Chicago owns a casino, that Chicago would also regulate a casino. And given the city's illustrious history of corruption, is that something we want to see?
Well, Springfield doesn't have that great of a reputation as far as corruption either. I think we've had a few governors who've gone to jail in recent past. Yeah. I think, as long as there's transparency, I think we can trust the regulators in Chicago if indeed they do decide to regulate it. But, there would always be a negotiation between the city and the state. Nothing's going to happen in a vacuum, I don't think.
Lenny, isn't that the fox guarding the hen house?
Sometimes it is. But I think part of what we need to look at is this. How do people benefit from a long term? I think that if we can see where folks that don't have jobs, if we can see some of the construction workers that have been laid off doing construction, not just breaking ground, but having long-term construction on these types of grounds, even here in the city of Chicago, I think that the concern that people would have as far as some people benefiting and others not benefiting, things that we have seen throughout the history of this city, I think that dissipates somewhat. I think it's really going to boil down to this. Whoever's in charge of this, whether it's the city of Chicago regulating their own or if this is a statewide venture, is there the type of leadership there that makes sure that they're bringing jobs in short-term, long-term, that everybody's getting a piece of the pie so that we're filling in some of the gaps that we have, but at the same exact time, there are communities that are benefiting so we can fix some of the problems that we've been facing for quite some time. That's the whole purpose of these casinos in the first place.
While we're talking about gambling, any bets here on what the governor's going to do?
I think the governor will go for it. I mean, it's what you said. It's jobs as far as improvement of a neighborhood, and anything that brings in revenue that is not a tax increase. I'm on board.
Yeah, and I think the same thing. I think the sponsors of the bill at this point are very intent on ensuring that there's the appropriate ethical language in the statute, which I think is probably foremost on the mind of the governor. I don't think the governor personally will have too much concern if Chicago is the fox guarding that hen house. I don't think that's the issue that will tip the balance for him the other way. So I think if something comes to his desk, which will bring the revenue into the state that's so necessary, he'll sign it.
But he's also said that he's not going to sign a casino bill until he gets a pension deal. And what are the odds there?
He needs a win. And if he's going to try to tie a difficult win to something that's a little bit more of a low-hanging fruit type of win, he's going to have a hard time. He needs to be able to go to folks across this state in a very tough election year. He doesn't have to worry about just winning in the general election. He has to worry about a primary. And he has some tough competitors that are lining up right now. So he has to be able to come to folks throughout this state and say, I have a win that's not going to raise taxes, that will bring business in and will bring other people's money from Indiana and Wisconsin, the border states that we've been losing money to. It's going to finally come back to
but
here.
But will he hold out for a pension deal first?
I don't think he will.
Really?
I think it may be moot because I think we'll have a pension deal, not one that I think will be to everybody's satisfaction or that will be comprehensive, but I would expect that at least some aspect of Speaker Madigan's plan will go through. I don't see Speaker Madigan blinking and actually moving President Cullerton's union-sponsored bill. But from what we're hearing out there, there are various pieces of Speaker Madigan's bill that would either affect the cost of living adjustments or would actually cap salaries, pensionable earnings on salaries, and one or more of those pieces will go through, will go to the governor's desk. I think he will sign that and will immediately go to court, and we'll see what happens. I mean, the court is obviously where this will end up, and we all know that. And then we'll have to go from there and see where things are. But I can't imagine they will end session without something going through and getting to the governor's desk on
And
pensions.
even with something like that, which might be described maybe as a partial win or a partial moving forward on pensions, is, I think, going to be a plus. The governor isn't going to fix the whole problem all at once. So a partial win is a win.
And if he can tie that to a casino win, now he has 2 wins that he can present to the people and say that he had a successful session that, in essence, he oversaw as the governor of the state. He needs those types of things going into the fall because he's going to be going up against people that are raising a lot of money to run against him. And if he doesn't have something on the table other than these high unemployment rates that have been long lasting, he's going to get hit a lot in the primary. And if he survives that, he's going to have a devils of a time in 2014 in the
So
fall.
a huge amount of work for Springfield to finish in the next 24 hours. So stay tuned.
They've done it before. They could do it again.
We talked about guns earlier, and this week in Chicago, we had an arrest in this horrible case of the 6-month-old baby, Janila Watkins, who was killed. The suspect is a career criminal. And this news comes just as Mayor Emanuel in Chicago is trying to line up heavy corporate hitters, raising millions of dollars. And the question here is, obviously it's a great idea for businesses to pitch in, but can Chicago buy its way out of this violence program?
The gun violence issue is not a matter of gun control. It's a matter of controlling gun violence. And we know that we're talking about communities that don't have jobs, that have schools that are struggling or failing. You have people that do not have hope. If you can start having the type of capital investment, and not just capital investment, but also human capital investment that come back into these neighborhoods with a short-term and long-term plan that can get people back on the path of employment and self-empowerment. Yes, this will be successful, but if it's just something where we're dumping money into programs to make sure kids have something to do for 90 days, this is going to be a fruitless exercise. I'm hoping that people see this as an opportunity to build entrepreneur opportunities.
Well, you raise a very, very good point. I mean, is the money better spent instead of another mentoring program when you've already got boys clubs and girls clubs and so on? Is it better spent by these companies? And you've got Allstate, Exelon, and Boeing each pitching in $5 million. Would it be better if they built factories or offices in these neighborhoods?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Jobs are a long-term solution to the problem. I vote for Lenny.
I agree with Joan and Lenny on this one as well. But I know at this point we haven't really seen the full extent of any plan. That's been criticized, the fact that there's all of this money without necessarily a plan yet. But I think it's too early to criticize. There could be very strategic means of utilizing these dollars in ways that support what we've talked about here and in other ways. And so I think it's just exciting to see that there's that much investment in this area.
And to both of their point, we not only need jobs for the adults, for the 25-year-olds and up, but we need to be able to reintroduce a 16-year-old into what it's like to be able to go into corporate America, whether it's with a trade degree or a college degree, and have that be a suitable plan and dream for their life. Right now, there are too many of these kids that are picking up illegal guns and using them because they don't see a legal means to sustain themselves. Therefore, if these corporations put this money into that and reinvest in that dream, that vision, I think it will definitely be successful.
Senator Mark Kirk has a slightly different approach. He wants the feds to crack down, do mass arrests of Chicago's biggest street gang, the Gangsta Disciples. He's run into a buzzsaw already of opposition. Front page of the paper today, Congressman Bobby Rush calling it a upper middle class white boy solution, perhaps an unfortunate choice of words, but clearly a big difference of opinion on whether a Fed crackdown is a good idea.
Why can't it be a two-pronged approach? Step up the police presence, step up the police activity into trying to derail some of the violence, and simultaneously build a factory, create some jobs, not an after-school program that, somebody goes to for a couple hours, but something that provides them with another lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting when you have a new U.S. attorney coming on board, there's going to be an opportunity for him to lay out what his priorities are, and so it makes sense that you see Senator Kirk and others trying to help him with that process. I think it's undeniable that we have a gang problem here in our city. So whether it's the feds alone or whether it's the feds with the state's attorney actually partnering to try to address this, which I think they do, I think focusing on it is a good thing, not a bad thing.
On that note, we're out of time. Quick shout out to the Chicago Blackhawks. Came back from that 3-1 deficit to win, and they're moving on to the finals in the conference. Darren Reesberg, Joan Esposito, Lenny McAllister, thanks for your time tonight. We appreciate it. One Chicago Cafe has come a long way since its early days of serving sandwiches and coffee from a little red wagon. Today it's blossomed into an organization that makes meals and so much more for the needy in Chicago. A remarkable little place in Chicago gives a big hand to those who are down on their luck. On the menu, hot meals and friendly conversation served up with a side of inspiration.
Did somebody take your order yet? No. All right, I'll be right back.
Inspiration Cafe looks like any other ordinary restaurant. Daily specials posted on the wall. Busy waiters ferrying food from a bustling kitchen. But all the servers and cooks are volunteers who donate their time and effort.
You got the omelet with cheese, ham, and mushroom? It's gone already. Okay.
What distinguishes this place are the prices. For diners, there are no checks. The food is free for people who are part of a self-sufficiency program offered here. The cafe, founded by former Chicago police officer Lisa Nigro, honored by President Obama for serving the homeless with dignity in a restaurant setting.
I like Inspiration because I feel like they're not just serving you a meal and sending you away.
Shannon Stewart leads the cafe's parent group, Inspiration Corporation, headquartered in the Uptown neighborhood. The nonprofit served more than 36,000 meals last year here and in the Woodlawn neighborhood, but it provides far more than mere food.
We also work with people on, getting their resume together, practicing their interview skills, and then connecting them to job opportunities as well.
Hello, yes, I got your message.
Consider the case of Dassin Wallace, a young woman who's come a long way.
I met Dassin several years ago when she was on the street and she was close to our offices, and I would walk by her every day.
Once homeless and addicted to drugs, Dassin turned her life around with help from the nonprofit group. She's already finished college and plans to get a master's degree. Now Dassin has a job at the Inspiration Corporation.
I know that this is my calling because at the end of the day, I just want to be able to say that I've helped someone.
Dassin's a great example of someone that we've helped her rebuild her life, and now she's giving back and she's helping other people that come through our program rebuild their lives.
Their motto at the Inspiration Cafe, dine well and do good. That wraps up this week's show. You are now in the loop.
For more, please log on to WYCC.org. The conversation continues right there, right now. I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Until next week, good night.